Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today's explainer is covering a truly provocative thesis about the future of the tech landscape. We're looking at a fascinating recent analysis that argues the massive tech monopolies we all know today are actually in decline, and incredibly, that they might literally be funding their own replacement. It's a wild idea, so let's get right into the source material.
Okay, let's dive into this. A really compelling question right off the bat is, why are fierce tech rivals suddenly pooling their money together? You've probably seen it in the headlines. Companies that have spent their entire existence trying to tear down each other's infrastructure are suddenly banding together as partners. But these aren't just strategic alliances. They're actually desperate ploys to survive a massive shift in how technology fundamentally operates.
The first major shift we need to talk about is what's being called the evaporating landlord play.
You see, the traditional infrastructure landlord model is basically evaporating. Why? It comes down to a really simple equation. When you take open-weight intelligence and combine it with open physical infrastructure, you get a grassroots, completely decentralized grid. This combo is quietly becoming the absolute most disruptive shift in tech right now, heavily accelerating the transition away from those massive, centralized corporate data centers we've relied on for so long.
The analysis breaks this down into two massive fronts. Front number one is the DePIN revolution.
If you aren't familiar with the term, DePIN stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks. Basically, it's the idea that the public is crowdsourcing the raw, bare metal computing power required to run enterprise AI, effectively replacing multi-billion-dollar corporate data centers. It's a classic David versus Goliath scenario, where grassroots networks are fundamentally cracking the corporate giants' monopoly on computing power.
Think about the stark contrast here. On one side, you have heavily guarded corporate data centers, giant fortresses, really. On the other side, you have this vast web of latent compute. Instead of relying on a single centralized building, DePIN aggregates idle, unused compute power from independent data centers, crypto miners, and honestly, even everyday consumer setups all around the globe.
And this brilliantly illustrates the under-the-hood economics driving this whole movement. In today's 2026 market, leasing a top-tier NVIDIA GPU through a decentralized network is often 45 to 60% cheaper than buying that exact same compute through legacy cloud monopolies. I mean, that is a staggering cost arbitrage. You just can't ignore numbers like that.
There are specific networks actively making this happen today. Platforms like ATHOS, Render, and IO.net. Thanks to these platforms, startups are literally scaling to millions of users without ever touching a legacy corporate server. The immense processing power they need is sourced entirely from the decentralized crowd.
Now, you might be thinking this sounds like highly experimental, complicated crypto tech. But make no mistake, this is now essentially invisible infrastructure. It has matured well beyond speculation. The blockchain backend is completely invisible to the developer. You simply pay with standard currency, and the network automatically handles all the complex distributed scheduling right there in the background. It just works seamlessly.
So that's the software side of things. Let's shift gears to front two open source hardware blueprints.
The Open Compute Project, or OCP, is actively stripping away corporate secrecy in the physical world. Through initiatives like this, the exact operational technology used by massive hyperscalers, the very same tech giants we've been talking about, is essentially leaking directly into the public domain.
Let's break down exactly what kind of blueprints the open source community is pushing out. First, you've got DC microgrids, which transition architectures to highly efficient, low-voltage direct current, bypassing traditional power grid inefficiencies. Second, modular facilities. These are plug-and-play, sustainable designs deployed locally to prevent vendor lock-in. And third, thermal and waste heat reuse frameworks, which show small operators exactly how to capture and recycle the massive thermal energy generated by AI workloads.
Why does all of this matter to us? Because when the physical design of a highly efficient data center becomes an open source standard, building a localized, independent node simply becomes a matter of assembly. It's like putting together a giant Lego set. It's not proprietary research anymore. The blueprint is entirely public. You no longer need a massive corporate gatekeeper with $1 billion R&D budget to figure it out.
This leads us to a pretty incredible irony, which brings us to the temporary scaffolding.
The author writes, "The traditional tech giants aren't just software incubators, they are the temporary scaffolding for a completely decentralized era." So the crucial point is this powerful metaphor. The giants are holding everything up and building the initial structure right now. But scaffolding, by definition, is meant to be taken down once the real building can stand on its own.
These monopolies are ironically spending trillions of dollars on their own obsolescence.
They're the ones currently jumpstarting the manufacturing lines for advanced chips. They're funding the initial, massive R&D loops required for self-improving code. And they are the ones forcing regional energy grids to finally upgrade. They are laying the extremely expensive groundwork that the decentralized movement will ultimately inherit.
To summarize this dual-front collapse of the monopoly model, the big players are rushing to partner for life right now because they can physically feel the walls closing in from both sides. The software is well out of the bag, and the hardware grid is rapidly fracturing directly into the hands of the public. Once those chips are out in the wild and the AI knows how to optimize its own footprint on local energy systems, that need for a giant corporate gatekeeper completely vanishes.
It leaves us with a truly fascinating reality to ponder. Looking at the deep-end software revolution and these open-source hardware blueprints, are tech monopolies spending trillions simply to engineer their own extinction? It's a massive structural shift in the digital landscape. Thanks for joining me today, Focus Learners, and keep questioning the infrastructure around you.